He made love to Celestine that night, and broke off the engagement to Susanna on his return. Husam didn't know if the matron's immaculate daughter would follow him. He didn't ask, but he did wonder and hope. He was a bastard, with no claim to title or real wealth. He had only the strength of his own person and nothing more. But actions have consequences, and it came 7 days following. Husam had been leading drills with the 7th Infantry of Raver in the fields out beyond Hawthorne Castle. It was a venerable post, second in command among one of the best-regarded divisions in the patronage. The young man knew it, and lived to be worthy of it. The summons to the Ironwood patron's study had seemed harmless enough, though by the stance of his father, Husam could sense that something was wrong. The small space was empty except for him. His father did not greet him upon his entry. The older man stood at the center table, his head heavy on a piece of paper in his hand. The young man closed the door behind him firmly, and the sound echoed to fill the empty space around them.
The Lady Celestine has parted ways with Lord of Frayne. Roland began with a turn to his son. The open missive lay heavy in his hand, and perhaps given him more information than she should have in the falling out. Roland shoved the open letter on the table, turning away from it. "Read it," he commanded as his feet carried him to the near balcony, and his hands fell to its railings. Husam stared at his father, lost for words, his eyes dashing between him and the letter on the table. He approached it cautiously, and with a growing sense of dread. But he had to know its contents, as he lifted it in his hands and saw the words written there. Lord of Frayne had found out about the affair in his castle. How didn't matter, only the dark and poisonous words describing the bastard son who read them, and the threats the royal promised if he was not punished. "Lord of Frayne is furious," Roland said with his back to his son. "Talks of leaving our alliance for the dishonor." Husam stared silently at his father. His shoulders hung low, unable to move. The Ironwood King growled with slow rising fire. "And you didn't tell Susanna this when you broke off the engagement? That you fucked the matron's daughter? You thought you could avoid that bit of news? Her feelings mattered so little that you couldn't tell her the truth." Husam stood his ground, but his body was shaking. Roland turned in a blink, his stamping step an inferno as he blasted from the window and stood before his son. "Do you know in how many ways you fucked up? And for what?" Husam found a voice, weak but determined. "I don't love her." His father struck him across the face. Husam staggered under the force of it, but took the sharp pain in silence. Roland glared at him. "Why do you insist on reminding me that you're just a bastard?" The words stung more than the hand. There was pain and defeat in his father's voice, mixed with the growling anger on its surface. Husam couldn't remain silent, though. He had to say what was in his heart. "She doesn't love Frayne, and Frayne doesn't love her. She's just a trophy to him. She hates him." "And how certain are you that you're not just some dalliance for her?" he challenged. "You haven't been the only one." The statement was foolish. He remembered the duel. They weren't just words. His body still shook, but Husam stood his ground. He stared defiantly at his father, his eyes not once straying from the man's face. "I'll rend Lord of Frayne to oblivion. I'll duel him on even terms, and show him for the scamular that he is." "By fucking Vestal, you will not! Raver stands because of that scamular. Our patronage stands because of him and this whole alliance." The Ironwood patron barked viciously. If ever you dare to attempt it, I will fucking destroy you! Those harsh words silenced Husam. His father had so rarely spoken so forcefully against him. It made the young man wonder. Battle was simple enough, and he knew it well. This was something else. Husam cast his eyes from his father and towards the ground. The ironwood patron relented as he turned his head back towards the letter on the table. There were words of actions written there. Actions not easily done. Politics. Fucking politics. You understand nothing of them. You are a bold son. You are my son. And Celestine, a bold woman. He began with a turn. With pride we raise you until it bites us in the ass. The ironwood patron sighed. Unfortunately, it changes nothing. The quivering in his body only grew. A decision had already been made. But Husam could not back down. Not here. Why? Why can't it? We love each other. There was no rage in his father's voice anymore. Just exhaustion as he walked out towards the balcony and looked out from it. I should have ingratiated you more to the affairs of state than just the fires of war, like me and Elizabeth did for Cassandra and Hermia. Maybe you would have understood how little love has to mean in the realm of politics. Husam looked to the land below in the long silence that followed those words. He lifted his head to the west and that ever-shifting border of conflict. The scorched imperator. All causes start with him. Everything, the young man said with a degree of understanding. Roland nodded. He grows stronger with every season as he consolidates the patronages under his heel. A neutral crescent is a friend to that warlord. He stood silently as those unwelcome thoughts settled in his mind. His father's words echoed with a painful truth passed to him ages ago, when he was a boy, dueling at wood swords. I forgot how we have to be allies. Roland nodded, another acknowledgement. Someone has to suffer for this, and it will not be the matron's daughter. And here the punishment was, right at his feet. Husam stared at his father with a look of disbelief, as that sense of apprehension only grew in his chest. Roland was a man who had fought armies 3 times the size of his own and never blinked. This was a warrior who had fought goblins twice his size and laughed at them. He couldn't believe it. He didn't want to believe it. Why? Husam asked desperately. There has to be another way. There's always been another way. For the first time, his father ignored him. You have been stripped of your position among the 7th Infantry. You have a commission now in the far south, the southern shelf, away from Lord Efrain, away from Celestine, and away from me. He told his son, it leaves in a fortnight. I'll have to very publicly throw you into the dungeons if you don't take it. The tender defeat in his father's voice felt jarring to Husam. The heaviness in his father's voice spoke volumes to Husam's thoughts. The young man sought some words to speak, but found himself lost. You'll find the written order with our steward. Get out. His father commanded with a low growl. Father, I said get out! Husam turned from his father and stared at the door behind him. With a tightness in his throat, he hesitated, wondering if the beast of a man had anything more to say. But in the great space between them, there reigned only an oppressive silence. Roland, his father, stood at the balcony, head held high but silent. It was over. There was nothing more. Ironwood patron. The young man took his leave of the room, Husam, Roland said. Father, we can't see each other again. Not for a very long time. It's not because I want to, but it's because I have to. Know I love you, and I always will. Those were the words that hurt the most. The young bastard felt the sudden urge to cry, but he forced those tears back. "Aye, Father," he said in a voice barely above a cracking whisper. The young man closed the door behind him with a shudder, embracing the dark and empty shadows of the hallway. Those would be his last parting words to him, the last time Husam would see him. There would be no more favors from his father, no promise of a royal's future. One act, one's honor followed against another. Everything that he had known and everything that had made him proud was taken from him. He was banished, cast to the wilderness, with not the faintest inkling of what might come of it. All that Husam knew was that everything felt wrong.
I can't believe you hit me with a fucking arrow.
Magdalena groused at Bonifak. How do you know it was me?
Look at the damn fucking feathers, same as yours.
Hey, you're alive. Don't be a Janet. Husam watched the two of them from a distance, hearing their loud exchange that came to pass in front of him. The new day was bright, cool, and quiet, the storms having relented their assault against the mountains. He bore it with a wide grin, and maybe even the whisper of a chuckle, as he sat on a rock staring out at the wilderness. The gore of battle lay heavy on him. Blood mingled with sweat had dried and plastered. He had been fortunate in that little of that great mess was his own. But for some spare bruises, sore muscles, and small cuts, he'd come out of the fight unscathed. The bodies of some 10 or 16 goblin corpses, slung motionless among the ground, scattered and untouched where they had fallen. Husam turned his head to the sounds of boots crunching on gravel. His eyes caught those of the caravan leader as he approached him. The two shared a cursory nod of acknowledgement as the elder man took a seat beside him. Thomas Gallowar's gaze followed Husam's down the road. "You send Levi out?" The half-blood royal nodded his head. "By horse. We're close enough to Kurfan that I wouldn't be surprised if a sortie gets to us by the late afternoon." The caravan leader nodded, turning his head up to the sky, deep blue and clear. "It's a nice day. Rare in the season of storms." Both of those were true, but Husam let those things stand for themselves as the bright rays of the sun warmed him. The mountains and stones stretched far and away before them. From somewhere a flock of seabirds took to the skies, flying south and calling to it.
Ow, fuck! You meant to do that!
Magdalena complained as Bonifak sought to pull the arrow from her thigh. "It's almost out. Of course it's gonna hurt."
I'm going to remember this. Don't think I won't.
She growled. The two other caravan guards continued in their little drama. Husam and Thomas shared a chuckle as they watched. The caravan leader's attention turned to the bodies of goblins strewn about the ground. Tattered armor and worn axes. Hardly the marks of a strong clan. "How many of those are yours?" Husam didn't turn his head. "I don't know. It's just a matter of killing." Magdalena screamed as Bonifak finally pulled the arrowhead from her thigh. With a burst of energy, she sprung up and socked him in the face. The caravan guard fell flat on the ground and began wrestling with the woman as she pursued. "What the fuck, Delena?"
Mongrel fucking scammler! You wanted that to hurt, and don't tell me otherwise.
Husam and Thomas shared a chuckle at the sight. The brawl between the two guards had drawn the attention of other people from the caravan, as bits of laughter rose into the air. Magdalena and Bonifac halted their fight at the sudden realization. The two stared at each other sheepishly. The caravan leaders smirked. You know you can be pretty competent when you want to be, but you don't have all of that distracted horseshit of yours. Husam knew what Thomas meant by those words. The name unspoken, but the person always present. Somehow in that moment, the pain of it seemed tempered. He could take it with just a sigh. Her name is Celestine. I know her name. Everyone and their second nephew knows her name. Every noble east of the Gatacanis pines for the daughter of the matron. Husam sighed. I know. You think I don't know that? Thomas turned to him, his searching eyes seeming to pay more attention to Husam than he had before. You're a decent bastard, Husam, but you're still just a bastard. And by just about any patron, matron, or fucking regent other than Roland, you would have been given less. The young man thought of his father, the disappointment in his face. How the memory of that was almost worse than the loss of that woman he had held above all else. His words were a crackling whisper. I know that too. Bonifac and Magdalena continued to stare at each other awkwardly. The first of them stood up slowly, dusting himself off. He offered a hand to the woman on the ground, and she took it, pulling herself up with a grimace across her face. Sorry. Maybe I didn't need to pull so hard. An acknowledging soft grin rose to her face.
You grounded in there really hard.
Heat of the moment. I feared for my life. Her dark skepticism persisted, but not without the shade of amusement. Peace appeared to have been made in that great conflict. Bonifac offered her his shoulder, and she took it, the two stalking back to the wagons together, Magdalena with a limping leg, Bonifac supporting her. Their audience slowly filtered away, tending back to the tasks of burying the dead and repairing the damaged consequences of the goblin raid. I thought you were just an entitled ass before, but Nas wouldn't have done what you did last night. The caravan leader turned to Husam solemnly. I do wonder now why you cheated on that princess. The young man stared back. He thought about the battles he had fought and the honor that he had earned. He thought about Susanna and his pursuit of the matron's daughter. It had all been the art of war for him, every action carried out with the clear certainty of an objective. Thomas looked on patiently with careful, studying eyes, waiting for a reply. Husam stood up slowly from the ground. His mind drifted to the conversation he'd had with Celestine in the bedroom. I wanted position, but I never loved Susanna. I always loved Celestine, and I still do. That mattered more, I guess. Royals don't live by love, though. They live by politics. And I guess I can't live by politics. The caravan leader nodded. It certainly seems to put her out of your reach now, doesn't it? Husam grimaced. He wished it wasn't true, but it did seem to have that ring to it. Now, more than ever, he sighed. Thomas Gallowar flattered him with a grin, his eyes turning up towards the sky and drifting down the road. The shit isn't over, Husam. Tomorrow's another day. The Southern Shelf exists by different rules than the patronages. It suits some. Definitely suits me. Might even lead to something better if you give it a chance. The caravan leader stood up suddenly. His hand fell reassuringly to Husam's shoulder. Clean yourself up for the soldiers from Kurfan. He turned his head back to the broken wagons and people shambling about. And when you're ready, come give a hand. You might just surprise me by not being a waste of a second. Aye, Constable. Husam's eyes trailed after the caravan leader as he walked away, boots scrunching on the open gravel. Survivors gave their nodded acknowledgments to him as he passed. The newly appointed constable of stocks directed hands to work and helped to repair the broken wagons. The day was cool, comfortable, with just a hint of warmth. The sky clear, nary a cloud, strange and rare in the season of storms. He was grateful for Constable Thomas's words, but had no way of knowing what he would do with them. He sat there for several moments, collecting his thoughts. He thought about Celestine, those intense blue eyes and the spirit she bore to fill them. His heart still burned. How great his heart still burned for her. It burned even more as he thought of the past and the events that had brought him to this moment. He wondered if he'd ever make it back to see her. He wondered if she would wait. He knew that he still loved her. Maybe he would always love her. But what could he do about it now? Husam turned his head southward, along the lonely road. His road. No. Maybe that was a figment of his own delusions. His eyes ran back to the battered wagons, newly dug ditches, and the coarse people who tended to them. Husam stared down at his hands, rough-hewn and dirty, the sheathed sword at his side a comforting certainty. He was a bastard, but it seemed like maybe here it mattered less. Maybe it didn't matter at all if he just gave it a chance. The muck and slaughter of war held tight to him. Husam stood up, grabbed a rag, and began to wipe it away. Still desperately trying to forget the past, he focused on the present and what little he could know of the future. He guessed that it was best to do as the newly appointed constable had told him. The soldiers from Kurfan would come, and a space further, he would arrive at his commission in stocks. Husam sighed as a defiant, soft grin rose to his face. Something felt right within for once. Something felt better than it had since he'd lost everything. Whatever came beyond that, he would make the best of it. By fluky, there was still the chance for outrageous fortune. He headed back to gather with his rabble and help with the repairs. Tomorrow was another day.
So, one of the readers that I gave this is actually a paid reader. I did a couple paid readers off of Fiverr. They were okay. They have their own struggles to deal with, because if you're too forward with your customer with like the rough spots of something, they might not pay you. And I recognize that, and I want to acknowledge that ultimately. But anyway, one of the big kind of issues they had with the story was like how the ending felt kind of unfulfilling, and I was asking for elaboration. They're like, well, he didn't end up with the girl, and I'm like, yeah, but that's not really the point of the story. And the thing is that there is like a lot of other underpinnings that are, I try to integrate within any sort of fiction, because you can have a straightforward plot and that has a time and a place, but when you're trying to do something else, which I'm trying to do something else, and who knows if I'm succeeding, but I'm doing my best at it. But some of the things that I try to put in there is like, it's not just about the love between Husam and Celestine. This story is also about the familial love, the love between Roland and Husam. And it's not just about even that love either. It's also addition to, him trying to find his place in the world and thinking that, I want to be, in politics, I want to be in power, and suddenly he's, forced in this new place, the other side of that spectrum that he kind of profaned, and he's trying to be like, well, maybe that isn't that bad, but he doesn't know. And that's like, it's that hard thing when you're trying to make something that feels satisfying and genuine at the same time. And there's always going to be a degree of like artifice, because it's fiction. It's called fiction for a reason. But like, you might be, for some people you might be wanting that kind of ending, but like, it's sort of like that balancing act that any kind of writer has to, you know, work to make any of that go correctly. Anyway, thank you for watching this far. This is the end of my third story. I'm gonna keep going. I have like 3 other stories, 4 other stories that I need to work out. Still drawing over that art together and everything else like that. If you like my content so far, please like, comment, subscribe. I gotta say that a million times, because, you know, repetition breeds remembrance. And you can check me out on Pablo Americanus at Instagram. There I have, you know, different types of art, you know, some kind of ruminations on the process of commissioning all these different artists, and it is a process. And, you know, you'll get, you know, however, you know, far down that rabbit hole you want to get. I could totally talk about it, but yeah, let's have a chat. Tell me what you think about my story, if you liked it, if you didn't, why you didn't like it, why you did like it, all that other good stuff. There isn't a writer out there that actually, you know, exists that doesn't, you know, crave like a proper review of it, really. So I think that's all I got on that end. And you know, thank you again for all the great artists, and I will give that a part on this and say, salud.